Hey, case filers. Welcome back or welcome to Dark Roast Caffeine Case Files. I'm your host, Kate. Before we begin, I need to issue a listener discretion advisory. This episode contains graphic descriptions of violence, child death, kidnapping, and the brutal realities of American slavery. These are not easy stories to hear. They involve the darkest chapters of our history, and they involve real people who suffered unimaginable horrors. If you need to pause, take a breath, or step away at any point, please do so. Your well-being matters more than any episode. With that said, let's pour ourselves a strong cup and step into the shadows of history. The year is 1820. America is a nation divided, not yet by civil war, but by an institution so evil that it would eventually tear the country apart: slavery. And in the decades leading up to that war, a different kind of crime was being committed. One that rarely made the history books. The crime of kidnapping free Black people and selling them back into bondage. The crime of tearing families apart. The crime of treating human beings as property. These are the stories of people who fought back, who refused to accept their fate, who, in the face of unimaginable darkness, chose resistance. This week on Dark Roast Caffeine Case Files, I'm doing something a little different. Still true crime, always true crime. But in honor of Emancipation Day, which was August 1st. These stories are different from the typical cases we cover. There are no neat resolutions, no tidy endings, no justice served in a courtroom. Instead, these are stories of people who were treated as property, who fought back with everything they had, and who paid an unimaginable price for simply wanting to be free. John Reed, Solomon Northup, Margaret Garner, and Rose Herrera. Their names deserve to be spoken. Their stories deserve to be told. And like so many true crime stories of the past, these people need to be remembered and honored, not as victims, but as resistors, as fighters, as human beings who refused to accept the darkness that was forced upon them. This is their story. Our first story begins on a cold December night in 1820 in Kennett Township, Chester County, Pennsylvania. John Reed was a young African-American man between 27 and 30 years old. He was married. He had a child. He lived a quiet life, working odd jobs for his neighbors, trying to build something for his family. But John Reed lived with fear. He rarely went unarmed. He told his neighbors he was terrified of kidnappers, men who hunted free Black people like animals and dragged them back to slavery. He claimed they had tried to take him before. His fears were not unwarranted. You see, John Reed had escaped from Maryland. He believed he was a free man, freed by the will of his former master. He had come to Pennsylvania around 1817, hoping to build a new life. But in the eyes of the law, he was still someone else's property. Samuel Griffith was a slave owner from Baltimore County, Maryland. He claimed ownership of Reed, and on the night of December 14, 1820, Griffith decided to take what he believed was his. He came with a posse. 3 men accompanied him: his overseer, Peter Shipley, and 2 others identified as Miner and Pearson. They arrived at John Reed's home late in the evening. Reed refused to open the door. They broke in. What happened next was chaos. In the darkness of that small home, a fight for survival erupted. Reed shot Samuel Griffith. Griffith died that night. Then Reed grabbed a club and struck Peter Shipley over the head. Shipley would die from his wounds on December 21st. Reed grabbed his gun and ran to his neighbors, telling them the kidnappers had attacked him and that he thought they might pursue him. Here's what makes this case so damning. When authorities searched Shipley's body, they found handcuffs and rope in his pockets. They didn't intend to follow legal procedures for recovering escaped slaves. They intended to kidnap John Reed in the dead of the night, chain him up, and drag him back to Maryland, back to slavery. John Reed was arrested and charged with murder. Not 1 murder, 2. His first trial for the murder of Samuel Griffith took place on May 4th, 1821. The judge's charge to the jury took an hour and a half, and according to newspaper accounts, it was apparent that he had no doubt of the prisoner's guilt. The deck was stacked against John Reed. The judge believed he was guilty. The system was designed to protect slave owners, not the enslaved. And yet, the jury found John Reed not guilty. It was a stunning verdict, a rare moment of justice in a system built on injustice. But John Reed's ordeal wasn't over. He was tried again in November 1821, this time for the murder of Peter Shipley. The prosecution argued that Reed had beaten Shipley over the head with a large stick on December 14th, and Shipley had died on December 21st. The coroner's inquest stated that Reed had struck 1 blow in self-defense, but one witness claimed that Reed had told him he hit Shipley several times until he thought Shipley was dead. The judge, however, indicated he thought this witness was mistaken. This time, the jury found John Reed guilty, but of the lesser charge of manslaughter. His sentence? 9 years of imprisonment and hard labor in the penitentiary of Philadelphia. He was also ordered to pay the costs of prosecution. 9 years for defending himself against kidnappers who broke into his home in the middle of the night. John Reed's story is a window into a terrifying reality. In antebellum America, a free Black person was never truly safe. The law might have been on their side in theory. Pennsylvania had an anti-kidnapping act that was supposed to protect them. But in practice, the system was stacked against them. Reed couldn't demonstrate his free status. He had no proof of manumission. And without that proof, he was vulnerable. Always vulnerable. But John Reed fought back. He refused to go quietly, and in doing so, he became one of the first Black men to successfully use self-defense as a legal argument against kidnappers. His story is a testament to the courage of those who refused to be property. Our second story begins 21 years later, in 1841, and it begins with a promise. Solomon Northup was a free man, born in New York, the son of a freed slave and a free woman of color. He was a professional violinist, a farmer, a landowner. He had a wife, children, a life built on hard work and hope. He was also, in the eyes of the law, a target. In 1841, two white men approached Solomon Northup with an offer. They said they were looking for a talented musician to join their traveling circus. They promised lucrative work. They promised adventure. Solomon, a violinist by trade, saw an opportunity to provide for his family. He accepted. The men, Merrill Brown and Abram Hamilton, took him to Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. was a slave city. Slavery was legal there, and Solomon Northup walked right into a trap. He was drugged. His freedom papers were stolen. When he woke up, he was in chains. He had been kidnapped into slavery. Solomon Northup was shipped to New Orleans on April 24th, 1841. Aboard the brig Orleans, he was sold to a planter and held as a slave for nearly 12 years in the Red River region of Louisiana. 12 years. For 12 years, Solomon Northup, a free man, a husband, a father, was forced to labor on cotton plantations. He was whipped, he was starved, he was treated as property. And all the while, he never stopped fighting. He never stopped hoping. He never forgot who he was. Finally, in 1853, Solomon met a Canadian carpenter named Samuel Bass, who was working on his plantation. Solomon told Bass his story. Bass believed him, and Bass helped get word to New York, where state law provided aid to free citizens who had been kidnapped into slavery. Solomon's family and friends enlisted the aid of the governor of New York, Washington Hunt, and on January 3rd, 1853, Solomon Northup regained his freedom. 12 years. He had been enslaved for 12 years. Here's the part that will make your blood boil. Those who kidnapped and enslaved Solomon Northup received no punishment. The slave trader who sold him, James H. Birch, was arrested and tried. But he was acquitted because District of Columbia law at the time prohibited Northup as a black man from testifying against white people. Solomon's northern kidnappers were located and charged, but the case was tied up in court for 2 years because of the jurisdictional challenges. It was eventually dropped when Washington, D.C. was found to have jurisdiction, and the D.C. government did not pursue the case. The men who stole 12 years of Solomon Northup's life walked free. But Solomon did not stay silent. In his first year of freedom, he wrote and published a memoir, 12 Years a Slave. He lectured on behalf of the abolitionist movement. He told his story to anyone who would listen. His memoir became a national sensation. It exposed the brutal reality of kidnapping into slavery, a crime that was far more common than most Americans wanted to admit. Solomon Northup's story is a reminder that freedom, once stolen, is almost impossible to reclaim. But he never gave up. And in the end, his voice, his story, helped change the world. Our third story takes place just 3 years after Solomon Northup regained his freedom. It is, without a question, the most heartbreaking story in this episode. Margaret Garner was born into slavery on June 4th, 1834, on the Maplewood Plantation in Boone County, Kentucky. She worked as a house slave. She often traveled with her masters, even accompanying them on shopping trips to free territories in Cincinnati, Ohio. In 1849, she married Robert Garner, another enslaved person. They had 4 children by 1856. But Margaret and Robert wanted more than survival. They wanted freedom. And in January 1856, they decided to take it. On Sunday, January 27th, 1856, the Garner family set out on their journey to freedom. They crossed the frozen Ohio River. They made it safely to Cincinnati, to the home of Joseph Kite, a stop on the Underground Railroad. They thought they were safe. They were wrong. Within hours, their master, A.K. Gaines, arrived with federal marshals. They stormed Kite's home with warrants for the Garners. Margaret Garner knew what returning to slavery meant. She knew what awaited her children, and she made a decision that would haunt history forever. Determined not to return to slavery, Margaret decided to take the lives of herself and her children. When the marshals found Margaret in a back room, she had slit her 2-year-old daughter's throat with a butcher knife. The little girl was dead. Her other children lay on the floor, wounded but still alive. Margaret had intended to kill all of them and herself, rather than let them be taken back into bondage. The Garners were taken into custody. What followed was one of the longest and most spectacular fugitive slave trials in American history. Margaret's defense attorney, John Jolliffe, moved to have her tried for homicide in Ohio. Why? Because if she was tried for murder, she would be tried as a person, not as property. And if she was tried as a person, she would have a chance to challenge slavery itself in a free state court. Jolliffe argued that Margaret's trip to free territory in Cincinnati entitled her and her children to freedom. But the judge denied the Garners' plea for freedom. The court ruled that this was not a murder case, it was a fugitive slave case. Margaret and her family were viewed as property. They were returned to slavery. Jolliffe didn't give up. He convinced officials to arrest Margaret on the charge of murdering her daughter. He hoped a murder trial would give her another chance of freedom. But Gaines caught on to the plan. He relocated the Garners to several different plantations before finally selling them to his brother in Arkansas. Federal marshals were never able to serve Margaret with an arrest warrant. She never received a second trial. Margaret Garner died in 1858, 2 years after her desperate act of resistance. She died from a typhoid epidemic. She was 24 years old. Her story lives on today. It inspired Toni Morrison's Pulitzer Prize-winning novel, Beloved. It has been told in countless theatrical productions, books, and films. But we must never forget the real woman behind the story. A mother who loved her children so fiercely that she would rather see them dead than enslaved. A woman who was pushed to the absolute limits of human endurance, and who made an impossible choice. There are no easy answers in Margaret Garner's story. Only tragedy, only pain, only the brutal reality of what slavery does to the human soul. Our fourth story takes place during the chaos of the Civil War in 1862. It is a story of a mother's relentless determination and a kidnapping that became an international scandal. Rose Herrera was born into slavery in rural Louisiana. She was bought and sold several times before being purchased by the DeHart family of New Orleans. Still a slave, she married and had children, who also became the property of the DeHarts. When Union forces captured New Orleans in 1862, Rose Herrera's owners fled to Havana, Cuba, and they took 3 of her small children with them. Rose was left behind. The Emancipation Proclamation was issued in 1863. Slavery was officially ending. But what did that mean for Rose Herrera's children? How far did the rights of freed people extend? No one knew. Not Black people, not white people. The law was unclear. So, when Mary DeHart, Rose's former mistress, returned to New Orleans in 1865 to visit friends, she was shocked to find herself taken into custody. She was arrested as a kidnapper. Rose Herrera had brought suit against her former mistress for kidnapping her children. The case made its way through New Orleans courts. It ignited a custody battle that revealed both the prospects and the limits of justice during Reconstruction. But Rose didn't stop there. She took her fight to the highest levels of government. Rose Herrera's perseverance brought her children's plight to the attention of members of the U.S. Senate and the State Department. They turned what had been a domestic conflict into an international scandal. The kidnapping of Rose Herrera's children became a diplomatic incident between the United States and Spain, which controlled Cuba. We don't know exactly what happened to Rose's children. The historical record is frustratingly incomplete. But what we do know is this: Rose Herrera never gave up. She fought through the courts. She fought through the Senate. She fought through the State Department. She refused to accept that her children were gone. Rose Herrera's story is a testament to the power of a mother's love and the determination of a woman who refused to be silenced. Our final story takes us to the aftermath of the Battle of Antietam in September 1862. President Abraham Lincoln had just issued the most significant presidential decree in American history, the Emancipation Proclamation. But not everyone was happy about it. George B. McClellan, Lincoln's chief military commander in the field, was outraged. Within days of the proclamation, 2 former Union officers crossed the lines into Confederate territory. Their mission? An elaborate subterfuge to scam Lincoln into withdrawing the proclamation. This was a plot to perpetuate slavery. The scheme was engineered by a man the National Police Gazette once declared the king of the confidence men. It involved Southern spies, Union detectives, and a cloak and dagger chess match that played out in the months before the Emancipation became effective. The plotters promised nebulous peace terms in exchange for the withdrawal of the Emancipation Proclamation. They nearly succeeded. Herman Melville, the great American author, had warned of such a scheme 5 years earlier. But the plot was so secretive, so carefully constructed, that it remained hidden for 150 years. This is a story of how close America came to losing emancipation before it even began. It's a spy thriller, a conspiracy, a nearly successful attempt to keep millions of people in chains. The plot failed. Emancipation held. But the fact that it came so close to succeeding is a chilling reminder of how fragile freedom can be. These stories, John Reed, Solomon Northup, Margaret Garner, Rose Herrera, and the plot to perpetuate slavery are not separate tales. They are threads in the same dark tapestry. Together, they tell the story of a nation grappling with its greatest sin. They tell a story of people who refused to be property, who fought back, who loved their families so fiercely that they would kill, be killed, or spend 12 years in chains rather than accept their fate. John Reed spent 9 years in prison for defending himself against kidnappers. Solomon Northup spent 12 years enslaved by men who stole his freedom. Margaret Garner killed her own daughter to save her from slavery. Rose Herrera fought all the way to the Senate to get her children back. And a conspiracy of spies and confidence men nearly derailed emancipation itself. These are the crimes of emancipation. These are the prices that were paid for freedom. But here's what we must remember. These stories are not just about darkness. They are about resistance. They are about courage. They are about the indomitable human spirit that refuses to accept injustice. John Reed walked free eventually. Solomon Northup told his story to the world. Margaret Garner's story inspired generations. Rose Herrera never gave up, and the plot to perpetuate slavery was exposed and defeated. Freedom is never free. It is always fought for. And these stories remind us that the fight for justice is never truly over. Thank you for joining me for this deep dive into the crimes of emancipation. These are heavy stories. They are difficult to hear and even more difficult to process. But they are stories that need to be told. As always, stay safe. And please take care of yourself after listening to this episode. Do something grounding. Call a friend, pet a dog, sit in the sunlight for a few minutes. The darkness in these stories is real, but so is the light in the world. Don't forget to find it. For those interested in learning more about the history of slavery and emancipation, I highly recommend the following: 12 Years a Slave by Solomon Northup, Beloved by Toni Morrison, Beyond Freedom's Reach, A Kidnapping in the Twilight of Slavery by Adam Rothman, The Plot to Perpetuate Slavery by Phil Roy Craft, The Equal Justice Initiative's Report on the Legacy of Slavery and Racial Injustice. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Please follow me on Substack, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, and Facebook. You can listen to my podcast on your favorite streaming service. The links are in the show notes. And if you love the show, support us at buymeacoffee.com/darkroasttruecrime. Every cup keeps the cases brewing. Stay tuned for more coffee and more crime. Bye now.